Police sirens and ambulance horns shattered the usual calm of the student neighborhood. Yellow crime scene tape was strung up, creating a chilling boundary between the ordinary world and the hell that Haley's friends had just discovered. The first responders at the scene could only confirm what Dominique had already known deep in her heart when she looked into her friend's lifeless eyes. Haley Anderson was dead, and judging by the state of her body, she had been gone for some time. For investigators from the Binghamton Police Department, the details of the scene spoke volumes. There were no signs of forced entry, no signs of a prolonged struggle. Instead, they saw evidence of a sudden and violent attack. Haley appeared to have been assaulted while completely off guard by someone she had willingly let into her personal space. A preliminary on-site autopsy revealed that the cause of death was asphyxiation due to strangulation, an act both intimate and brutal, requiring the perpetrator to look directly into the victim's eyes while slowly squeezing the life out of her. But Orlando Tercero was no longer in his apartment. In fact, he was no longer in Binghamton, and as investigators dug deeper, they would soon discover that he was no longer even in the United States. Security cameras from the apartment complex provided the first clues about the events leading up to Haley's death. The night before, at around 1:15 a.m., Haley was seen entering Orlando's building, showing no signs of distress or hesitation. She appeared to go involuntarily, possibly in response to an invitation or message from Orlando. A few hours later, cameras recorded Orlando leaving the building alone, looking rushed and anxious, carrying a large backpack. He returned to the apartment twice in the following hours, each time leaving with more belongings, before finally departing for good in the early morning. A search of his apartment revealed another chilling clue: a handwritten note in Spanish written in a hurried, uneven script. Once translated, it was a disturbing mix of confession, justification, and a stated intent to commit suicide. "You left me no choice," one section read. "I couldn't bear to see you with him. If I can't have you, then no one can." But rather than carrying out the suicide mentioned in the letter, Orlando chose a different path: escape. A swift investigation revealed that Orlando had booked a one-way ticket to Nicaragua, his home country, departing from JFK International Airport just hours after leaving his apartment for the last time. By the time investigators uncovered this, he had already landed in Managua and disappeared into a country with no extradition treaty with the United States. This appeared to be a carefully calculated plan, a chilling reminder that Haley's death was not the result of a sudden outburst, but a premeditated act. News of Haley's death spread through the Binghamton University campus like a tidal wave of grief and disbelief. Classes were canceled. Emergency counseling sessions were arranged. A spontaneous candlelight vigil took place at the entrance of the Health Sciences building, where Haley had spent countless hours studying and dreaming. Hundreds of students, faculty members, and community members gathered, each holding a candle, forming a small sea of light in the darkness. A fitting symbol of how Haley had brought brightness into the lives of those around her. At the vigil, people shared stories about Haley, not about how she had died, but about how she had lived. Professors spoke of her relentless passion in the classroom. Patients from her clinical internship recalled her kindness and compassion. Friends shared memories of laughter, adventures, and late-night heart-to-heart conversations. Through the tears and occasional laughter, a portrait of Haley Anderson emerged, not just as a victim of a terrible crime, but as a young woman full of life, who had touched and enriched so many lives in her short time on Earth. After the vigil, as the crowd slowly dispersed, Haley's 5 closest friends, including her roommates and longtime friends from the nursing program, remained behind. They sat in a small circle, their candles still burning, sharing memories they weren't yet ready to release to the world. They reminisced about inside jokes, silly nicknames, and the little moments that had formed their friendships. They vowed to live in a way that Haley would be proud of, with kindness, courage, and joy. And they made a solemn promise to each other that they would fight for justice for their friend, no matter how long it took or how difficult it would be. Somewhere, nearly 2,000 miles away from Binghamton, in a small town in Nicaragua, Orlando Tercero was trying to disappear. He had sought refuge with a distant relative in a rural area, a place where few people knew him or his ties to the United States. But the wheels of justice had already begun to turn. Binghamton police were working with the FBI and international law enforcement agencies. A warrant had been issued, and in Nicaragua, where the case had become national news due to its connection to a local citizen, public pressure was mounting for the government to take action. Just 7 days after Haley's death, in a move that surprised many, Nicaraguan police arrested Orlando Tercero. Although there was no formal extradition treaty between Nicaragua and the United States, the Nicaraguan government decided to try Orlando under their own legal system for murder. It was an unusual and complex legal process, requiring unprecedented cooperation between two nations that rarely engaged in diplomatic exchanges. For Haley's family and friends, Orlando's arrest brought a small measure of relief amid their overwhelming grief. Karen, Haley's mother, spoke at a brief press conference, her voice trembling with emotion but her gaze firm. "My daughter was the embodiment of light and love. She dedicated her life to helping others. While nothing can bring her back, we are grateful for the efforts of law enforcement in ensuring that the person responsible for her death will face consequences." In the months that followed, Haley's family faced the painful reality of a murder trial conducted in a foreign country. The trial, carried out under Nicaragua's legal system, was vastly different from what they might have expected in the United States. Instead of a jury, a single judge would determine the verdict. Instead of witnesses testifying in the courtroom, many gave their statements via video from the U.S. consulate in Nicaragua. Karen Anderson and Haley's roommates bravely faced the emotional ordeal of recounting Haley's story. Her relationship with Orlando, the warning signs they had noticed, and the heartbreaking details of discovering her body. They did this via a video feed, speaking through an interpreter, while Orlando Tercero sat in a courtroom halfway across the world, listening to their testimony with a blank expression. Orlando's defense attorneys argued that their client had acted under the influence of alcohol and in a state of lovesick delirium, a temporary loss of reason caused by a combination of substances and overwhelming emotions. They painted him as an exemplary student under immense pressure, a young man who had loved too deeply and reacted tragically when faced with rejection. To Haley's family, this defense was not only baseless, but offensive, an attempt to romanticize the actions of a murderer. The evidence against Orlando was undeniable. Security cameras had captured his movements on the night of Haley's death. His DNA was found under Haley's fingernails, indicating that she had fought for her life. His own handwritten confession, along with his flight out of the country, further solidified the case. After 3 weeks of trial, the Nicaraguan judge delivered the verdict. Orlando Tercero was guilty of femicide, the murder of a woman due to her gender, a specific crime under Nicaraguan law. He was sentenced to 30 years in prison, the maximum penalty allowed by law. As the verdict was read, Karen Anderson clutched a photo of her daughter, silent tears streaming down her face. It was not the end of the pain. Nothing could end the pain of losing a child, but it was closure, a rare form of justice in a world where it is often absent. Later, at a brief press conference, Karen spoke again, this time with a stronger voice. Haley wanted to take care of people. That's why she pursued nursing. And now, even though she is gone, her story continues to care for others by raising awareness about violence against women and the importance of recognizing warning signs in relationships. She should have been graduating this month. She should have been starting her dream job. Instead, we are fighting to make sure that others don't go through what she went through. At Binghamton University, Haley Anderson's legacy lives on in tangible and meaningful ways. The nursing program, where she had spent years studying and growing, established the Haley Anderson Memorial Scholarship for students who exemplify compassion and excellence in clinical practice. Qualities Haley embodied: a small memorial garden filled with the vibrant wildflowers she loved was created near the Medical Sciences Building, providing a quiet space for reflection and remembrance. At Haley's class graduation, an empty chair with a bouquet of flowers was placed where she should have been sitting. In a profoundly moving moment, Haley's father stepped onto the stage to accept the diploma she had worked so hard to earn. As he held it in his hands, The entire auditorium rose to their feet in applause, not just for Haley's academic achievements, but for the spirit and character that had made her so deeply loved. Haley's friends found their own ways to honor her memory and find meaning in her tragedy. Dominique Saunders, who had discovered Haley's body, started a campus advocacy group for survivors of domestic and dating violence. Named Haley's Light, the group organizes workshops on recognizing red flags in relationships and how to intervene when a friend may be in danger. Allison Gray, another roommate, changed her major to psychology, planning to work with trauma victims and survivors of violence. After losing Haley, I realized there are so many people out there like her, trapped in dangerous relationships and unsure how to get out, she explained. I want to help them in a way I couldn't help Haley. That's how I keep her spirit alive. Joni Martinez, Haley's first dorm roommate, pursued her own dream of nursing with renewed passion. Every time I care for a patient, I ask myself, what would Haley do in this situation? She shared, and the answer is always the same. She would love more, listen more, and put people first. So that's what I try to do. That's how I bring her with me to every shift. For Haley's family, the journey continues with an indescribable pain. Birthdays, holidays, and milestones that Haley should have reached bring fresh waves of grief. But they have also found purpose in preserving her memory and working to prevent similar tragedies from happening to other families. Karen Anderson has become a speaker at awareness events on domestic and dating violence, sharing her daughter's story in hopes of helping others recognize the warning signs that Haley's friends and family had missed or misunderstood. She often speaks about the dark side of love, how possessiveness, jealousy, and control can masquerade as care, protection, and passion. And she speaks about Haley, not as a passive victim, but as a vibrant young woman who had tried to leave a dangerous relationship, but had not fully grasped the extent of the danger she faced. Haley believed in the good in people, Karen often says in her speeches. She couldn't imagine that someone she had once cared about could harm her, and that's why we need to talk about this. Because there are Holeys out there right now who don't realize the danger they are in. We can't save my daughter, but maybe we can save someone else. 5 years after Haley's death, on a warm spring day much like the one she passed away, a special memorial was held in the garden named after her at Binghamton University. The attendees included family, friends, faculty, and even some of the patients Haley had cared for during her internship. They gathered not only to remember her short life, but also to celebrate the lasting impact she had made. As the sun began to set, the attendees lit candles and placed them around a large photo of Haley, a picture taken in the midst of her nursing internship, wearing her uniform, with her signature radiant smile and eyes sparkling with joy. A friend brought a small Bluetooth speaker and played Bob Marley's "Three Little Birds," Haley's favorite song. One she would sing on her worst days to remind herself and others that everything would be all right. At Binghamton University, every spring, as the wildflowers begin to bloom in the garden that bears her name, the gentle sunlight filters through the lush green canopy, casting dancing patterns of light onto the red brick pathways. Laughter, music from portable speakers, and the rustling of book pages blend together, creating the familiar symphony of college life. Among the bustling students was Haley Anderson, a 22-year-old with golden blonde hair that shimmered under the sunlight, ocean blue eyes that reflected the sky, and a radiant smile so contagious that people couldn't help but smile back. That spring of 2018, Haley was taking her final steps toward graduation, her heart filled with excitement, and her mind brimming with countless plans for the future. A dream nursing job was within reach. A small apartment in the city had already been secured, and the adventures of her 20s were calling with all their bright promises. No one, not even Haley, could have imagined that her beautiful life would come to such a tragic end. Just weeks later, not due to an accident or illness, but at the hands of someone she had once trusted, perhaps even loved. Haley Elizabeth Anderson was born and raised in Westbury, a quiet town on Long Island, New York. wrapped in the warmth of her loving family. From a young age, she was extraordinary, always curious about the world, always eager to help others, and possessing a rare ability to light up a room with her infectious laughter. Her mother, Karen, had recognized early on that her daughter had an unusually open heart, a soul deeply sensitive to the suffering of others. At just 5 years old, after seeing footage of Hurricane Katrina's devastation on TV, Haley insisted on donating all the money from her piggy bank to relief efforts. At 10, she became the youngest volunteer at a local hospital, handing out books and fruit to patients every weekend. And at 16, after witnessing the compassionate care her grandmother received during a battle with cancer, Haley knew, without a doubt, that nursing was her calling. It was a profession where she could combine her love for science with her deep desire to heal and comfort those in pain. Haley's high school years were filled with academic excellence, extracurricular activities, and a close-knit group of friends who had been with her since childhood. Those friends would later describe Haley as the guiding light in their lives, the one who encouraged them to push past their limits, the one who listened to their deepest fears, and the one who always found a way to make everything better, even on the worst days. Haley wasn't just a friend. She was a companion, a mentor, a healer, quality she would carry into the nursing profession she pursued with passion. When Haley stepped onto Binghamton University's campus in the fall of 2014, she brought with her all the traits that made her special, along with a newfound thirst for adventure and a desire to explore the world beyond Long Island. The university campus unfolded before her like a miniature universe of endless possibilities, challenging courses, people from all walks of life with incredible stories, and the opportunity to redefine herself beyond the expectations of her past. And Haley, with her boundless curiosity and enthusiasm, embraced it all. Her first-year roommates were quickly drawn to her infectious energy and free spirit. Joni Martinez, one of those roommates, would later recall the first day she met Haley. This blonde girl with messy hair, struggling to hang a giant mandala tapestry on the dorm wall, singing along to a Bob Marley song, and constantly inviting strangers in for homemade almond cookies. "I knew instantly that she was special," Joni said through tears at Haley's memorial. Haley didn't just live by different rules than the rest of us. It was like she came from a world where everyone was kind and every moment was meant to be fully cherished. Not long after starting her rigorous nursing program, Haley became known among professors and classmates, not just for her sharp intellect, but for her unique approach to patient care. While many students focused on the technical aspects of nursing, Haley saw beyond that. She understood that patients were not just a collection of symptoms to be treated, but human beings with fears, hopes, and stories of their own. Haley had an innate ability to connect with patients on a deeper level, said Dr. Margaret Whitaker, her nursing professor. She understood that sometimes holding the hand of someone who was afraid could be just as important as administering the right medication. The miraculous balance between the challenging demands of academic life and a vibrant social life was something Haley had mastered. Despite a packed schedule filled with lectures, experiments, and clinical internships, she still found time to enjoy the joys of youth. In her second year, Haley moved out of the dorms to share an apartment near campus with 4 close friends. The apartment quickly became the group's favorite gathering spot, a cozy space adorned with colorful throw pillows, walls covered in artistic prints, and a collection of vintage vinyl records that Haley had patiently curated from thrift stores. On weekend nights, the sounds of laughter, music, and clinking glasses often echoed from the apartment as Haley and her roommates hosted small gatherings where everyone was welcomed with open arms. Haley is the life of the party, but not in the way you might think, Allison Gray, one of her roommates, later recalled. She's not the loudest person or the one who drinks the most. She's the one who notices the person standing alone in the corner and pulls them into the conversation. She's the one who remembers what kind of craft beer David likes and that Maria needs a non-alcoholic drink. She's the one who makes sure everyone feels seen and valued. It was at one of these gatherings, on a crisp autumn night in her third year, that Haley met Orlando Tercero, a Nicaraguan-born medical student with deep brown eyes and a charming smile. Their meeting seemed harmless at first. 2 students in the medical field bonding over stories of tough professors and challenging clinical cases. Their first conversation stretched into the early hours of the morning as they sat on the apartment's small balcony, wrapped in blankets to ward off the autumn chill, sharing their dreams, fears, and the moments that had shaped their lives. Orlando spoke of growing up in Nicaragua, of the sacrifices his family had made to send him to study in the U.S., and of the immense pressure he felt to succeed. Haley, with her natural empathy, was drawn to his honest confessions. Seeing in Orlando a complex and deeply emotional soul she felt she could understand. What started as a friendship built on mutual respect and understanding gradually grew into something deeper. Haley and Orlando began spending more time together, studying side by side in the library, exploring small-town restaurants, and occasionally planning weekend dates to escape the pressures of school. But to Haley's closest friends, there were troubling signs from the very beginning. Though Orlando could be incredibly charming and attentive, he also displayed subtle signs of possessiveness and control, constantly texting to ask where she was and with whom, expressing displeasure when she spent time with friends without him, and even occasionally showing up unannounced at places she was visiting. But Haley, with her open heart and tendency to see the best in people, brushed off these warning signs. She explained to her friends that Orlando was just being caring, that his overprotectiveness stemmed from childhood issues and cultural differences. "He comes from a different culture," she would often say. "There, men show their love in different ways. He just needs time to adjust." As their relationship continued, the darker side of Orlando became harder to ignore. There were moments when he would shift from a sweet, passionate partner to a jealous, angry man in an instant, often triggered by small things like Haley receiving a text from a male friend, or wearing an outfit he deemed too revealing. Their arguments grew more intense, with Orlando sometimes throwing objects or punching walls to express his frustration. After each incident, he would shower Haley with apologies, often accompanied by flowers, gifts, and promises that it would never happen again. And Haley, believing in the power of change and in her love for Orlando, forgave him every time. The summer before Haley's final year of college marked a turning point. She had secured a prestigious internship at a hospital in New York City, while Orlando remained in Binghamton for summer courses. The physical distance gave Haley space to reflect on their relationship, especially as she was surrounded by new colleagues who immediately recognized the warning signs when she described her situation with Orlando. "It was the first time I ever heard someone call it abuse," recalled Samantha Hughes, one of Haley's fellow interns that summer. "We were sitting in the hospital cafeteria, and Haley was telling us about how Orlando reacted when she posted a beach photo on Instagram. He had called her repeatedly, accusing her of deliberately seeking attention from other men, and even threatened to come to New York City to keep an eye on her." When she finished telling the story, we all just sat in silence. Then I said, "Haley, that's not love, that's control." And I saw it in her eyes. The realization was beginning to set in. As summer ended and Haley returned to Binghamton for her final year, she made a difficult but necessary decision: to end her relationship with Orlando. It was not a simple breakup. Orlando reacted with a whirlwind of emotions: anger, heartbreak, begging, and even threats of self-harm if she didn't reconsider. Every time Haley tried to cut off contact, he would show up at her home or workplace, sometimes intoxicated, pleading for another chance. And though Haley was firm in her decision that they couldn't continue as a couple, her compassionate heart made her reluctant to sever all ties, choosing instead to maintain some level of friendship, something her roommates warned was dangerous. Orlando's pain over losing Haley deepened when word spread that she had rekindled communication with a high school ex-boyfriend, a kind, stable man named Ryan, who had always held a special place in her heart. What started as occasional texts and catch-up calls gradually developed into a closer relationship, leading to weekend visits and plans for the future after graduation. As expected, Orlando did not take this development lightly. His jealousy, which had always simmered beneath the surface, now erupted into uncontrollable rage. His messages and calls became increasingly threatening and paranoid, often made in the middle of the night and lasting for hours. At times, according to Haley's roommates, he even followed her from a distance, sitting in his car parked outside her apartment for hours, just staring at her window. Then one day, after Haley had spent the weekend with Ryan, She returned to her apartment to find all 4 of her car's tires slashed. There was no note, no confession, but she immediately knew who was responsible. When she confronted Orlando via text, he denied everything, instead accusing her of being delusional and paranoid. However, in later messages, he let slip details about the vandalism that he couldn't have known unless he had been the one to do it. Even with this evidence, Haley didn't go to the police, a decision driven by lingering empathy for Orlando and fear of harming his academic future. Instead, she attempted to sever all contact completely, blocking him on all social media platforms and asking her friends not to share any information about her with him. The following weeks were relatively quiet, raising Haley's hopes that perhaps Orlando had finally moved on with his life. She focused on completing her graduation requirements, spending quality time with friends, and nurturing her blossoming relationship with Ryan. Spring had arrived in Binghamton, bringing the first flowers and a warm sense of new beginnings. Haley, with her natural optimism and belief in the good in people, had begun looking forward, moving past the dark shadow that her relationship with Orlando had cast over her college years. The night of March 8, 2018, started like any other joyful evening for Haley and her friends. They had gone to a local bar to celebrate completing a major exam filled with laughter, music, and even dancing. Photos and videos from that night captured a radiant and happy Haley, her blonde hair flowing as she twirled on the dance floor, her eyes sparkling in the dim bar lights. No one could have imagined that this would be the last time she would be seen this way, full of life, happiness, and freedom. Around midnight, Haley told her friends that she was feeling tired and wanted to head home early. A roommate offered to walk with her, but Haley declined, saying she wanted to take a walk to get some fresh air and shake off a developing headache. She hugged each of her friends, promised to see them for breakfast in the morning, and stepped into the night. That was the last time they saw her alive. The next morning, when her roommates woke up and saw that Haley's bed was untouched, they weren't immediately alarmed. Maybe she had stayed over at Ryan's or with another friend. But when texts and calls went unanswered, a growing sense of worry crept in. This was completely unlike Haley, who always communicated her plans and was always where she said she would be. Her roommates used the Find My Friends app to locate her phone and were shocked to see it at a familiar location, Orlando Tercero's apartment. With hearts pounding and rising dread, 3 of Haley's roommates drove to Orlando's apartment. They knocked on the door, but there was no response. The front door was locked, but as they walked around the building, they found a window slightly open. Dominique Saunders, the bravest of the group, climbed through the window while the others waited outside, praying they were overreacting and would find Haley peacefully asleep on the couch. Instead, Dominique's blood-curdling scream shattered the morning air, so agonizing that nearby neighbors heard it too. She had found Haley in Orlando's bedroom, lying on the bed, her body already cold. The bruises around Haley's neck told a heartbreaking story of her final moments. A desperate struggle to breathe, to live, to have just one more day in the world she had loved so much. Dominique collapsed beside her best friend, her cries mixing with the frantic screams for help, while the 2 friends outside dialed 911 with trembling fingers and shattered hearts.